So everyone knows this will be recorded so that we can send it out and have it as a valuable resource moving forward. I am Tessie. I'm our Director of Operations at Osteostrong Lakewood and Director of Marketing at Lakewood and DTC. So super happy to be here and be moderating our expert panel tonight. We'll be here about an hour and we'll go through a number of questions. The big focus tonight is how do we have healthy bones at any age? And specifically, how are we doing that through osteogenic loading? So we'll go over all of that, and I'll be introducing the panel, and then I'm also going to give them then the opportunity to kind of speak into a little more where they're from and how they got started in Osteostrong. So it's going to be a good time. Keep the chat open. If you guys have questions along the way, we'll try and catch those, and then we'll try and also leave a little time at the end for some specific questions. So we have, if Sarah, you want to wave, we have Sarah Glicken, who is the co-founder of Osteostrong Mar Vista in Los Angeles. After a successful career as a marketing and sales professional with over 20 years experience in music, design, hospitality, she left to pursue her dream of supporting people toward achieving optimal health. She is a pro-aging advocate and always finding ways to age gracefully through technology, mindset, supplementation. She has a master's in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica and is a certified holistic health coach from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. Sarah has a strong belief that everyone deserves to live in a healthy body. So yay, welcome Sarah. And I used to coach at Paradiso CrossFit in Los Angeles, and there were actually a few members there who had who did the spiritual psychology course and just like loved it. So maybe another time I would love to have a deep conversation with you about that.
Paradiso right down the street from us.
Yes, yeah, I know. I wish I knew about Osteostrong then, right? I was in LA for 9 years and then moved back to Denver. Okay, we have Dr. Rikin Patel, little wave, yay, welcome. Co-owner of Osteostrong Westfield in New Jersey. Rikin believes that the key to treating orthopedic pain and injury is all in prevention. In his 10 plus years of experience as a board certified sports medicine and pain physician, he has not come across a technological advancement that has the ability to improve your bone health, balance, posture, and optimize performance at any level and any age. He feels so fortunate to be a part of the impact that Osteostrong can have on that long-term health. So welcome, good to have you. Lastly, we have the one and only Mr. Greg Preston. Hello. Greg is owner of Osteostrong Lakewood and DTC, which him and his wife run. Greg is a former collegiate athlete with a background in engineering. After working as an engineer for several various corporations, Greg decided to leave the corporate world and pursue his passion of helping people improve their health. In 2017, Greg discovered Osteostrong and shortly thereafter decided to open actually the very first Osteostrong center in the state of Colorado, and that's our Lakewood location. Greg and his wife, Tiffany, live in Denver, Colorado, and they recently had an exciting new addition to the family, little baby Harrison, who is almost 2 months old now. So welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Bessie.
Yeah. So really quick, just to add on to that a little bit and have the audience get to know all of you a little bit better, I'd love to go one by one and just briefly share a little bit about your journey and how you got started with Osteostrong and why you love what you do. Sarah, would you like to start?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here with you all. Well, my journey to opening Osteostrong and doing what I do now really started in 1996 when my mom was diagnosed with cancer for the first time. And subsequently, I walked her through two different cancer journeys, all the same with the same cancer twice. And And then as well, my dad, and unfortunately both of them passed. But what came out of it, if we think about what Tony Robbins says, that everything is an opportunity for growth, even the most terrific things that happen in our lives. So from that very moment, I really had a deep and profound feeling inside of me that I wanted to do something where I could make a bigger impact in the world and help more people. And I knew I wanted to do it in the health and wellness space, but I did not know what that looked like. And then in 2017, I actually went to a Tony Robbins conference, actually sat next to Rick Patel and his wife at that event. Greg, I think, was potentially at that same event.
New Jersey.
And we, and I had this profound yes feeling, which was, this is the way that I can impact more lives, that I can help more people, that I can focus on longevity and pro-aging, healthy aging in a way that can massively impact lives around the world. So that was my journey of getting here.
Wow, that's awesome and so inspiring, and such a beautiful example of literally turning, some pain into purpose. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Rick, would you like to go next?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for having me. I think Sarah mentioned a little bit how I got introduced to Osteostrong. I think it was interesting because I really Osteostrong didn't trigger for me until I was actually taking a break at the event, and I came out to see my wife, who's a physical therapist, and she's like, "This is it." And I'm like, "What do you mean this is it?" I'm like, "I don't understand." And I looked up and Kyle was on stage, and then I started to take notice and went to talk to him after. And honestly, what dawned on both of us, having treated people with orthopedic and musculoskeletal injuries for so many years, was that, I'm seeing patients who are in their 60s, supposed to be in their golden years, and they keep telling me, "Hey, doc, these years aren't so golden." And the reality was they were suffering from debility related to joint and back pain. And a lot of that fundamentally, comes from the fact that as we lose bone density, we put ourselves in a situation to create these issues for ourselves. So it struck me that if we could focus on preventing bone loss or regenerating bone, and doing things naturally, okay, harnessing the body's ability to heal itself, which is something we hear about a lot now, what impact we could have on the health of others. And so that's really what got us into our Osteostrong franchise over 2 years ago.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love that you mentioned that the body's ability to, regenerate and heal itself, because we talked about, even in introducing this, that we would go over what biohacking is. And so that's basically the definition there is, using our body's natural ability to heal itself, to optimize. And we often will do that through technology, some of which we will go over today. So thanks for sharing that and your journey. Greg, what about you?
Yeah, thanks, Tessie. My origin story in Osteostrong resonates a lot with Sarah's story that she shared, in the sense that, growing up, my father had a stroke at a pretty young age. He was 48 at the time. I was just a young kid. And, growing up, I really thought of my dad as this really active individual who just, liked to play a lot of sports and do a lot of things. And shortly after his stroke, he was lucky to survive, but, lost the use of his left arm, had limited mobility in his left leg, and just lived the rest of his days in pain. He would ultimately pass from cancer as well. But, the lesson that I really learned from that was that if you lose your physical abilities, it can really have a profound impact on your quality of life. And so to me, when I learned about Osteostrong, it obviously excited me personally, as, being, kind of a former athlete and engineer, like the combination of those two pieces and how cool Osteostrong is. But what resonated at a deeper level was I saw it as an opportunity to actually help people experience the opposite of what my father experienced, and actually maintain and even regain some physical abilities lost. So that's why I'm so passionate and excited to be a part of Osteostrong.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the just such a personal connection, and it's so true and so inspiring what we see. So I want to kind of get into that a little bit. We have an amazing number of people. First of all, again, thank you guys so much for showing up and dedicating this hour with us to learn and to totally come away with hopefully some actionable steps for yourself or someone you know who might be struggling with bone loss or just wants to really optimize their health. It's relevant at any age. So I want to start with you, Greg, and then you can all chime in. So we're talking about bone health and bone loss. Oftentimes it can happen that someone might, if we're talking about later in life, there's one aspect to this, which is also maybe, younger. There's an aspect to athletic performance, and at any age it's beneficial. But often, what in the older in life, what can happen is we go for a bone scan, we're over 50, and we've actually been losing bone for decades, and we're just getting this information. So I'd love for you to kind of share that science behind what is happening with our bones throughout our life and when we start to lose bone and kind of what's happening in the body there.
Absolutely. And, I'll kind of give some context, and then, maybe I'll let Dr. Rick, dive deeper into some of the science and what's actually going on in the body that's causing this. But, what we know, the reason that bone health is really relevant for any age is because we know that our bone density peaks around age 30. And from that point on is when our skeletal system, really starts to weaken. And if you think about, when someone kind of hits their peak physical performance, it's not really a coincidence that coincides with our peak bone density, and that's usually our peak muscle mass as well. So someone in their late 20s, early 30s is usually quote unquote in the prime physical condition of their life. And then from there on, we think of getting older being synonymous with getting weaker. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It's not just some truth that as you get older, you get weaker. But in most cases, that is what's happening. And the reason is that our bone density, which is the physical structure of the body, the foundation of everything that is built on, that is getting weaker, year after year after year. And over decades of time, like you mentioned, Tessie, that adds up. And a lot of times we don't pay attention to it until we either break something or we reach a certain age and our doctor finally orders us a bone density scan.
Got it.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I think what's so important for everybody on this call is, to make a bold statement. Some people have heard me say this before, is our approach to bone density is completely wrong, in my opinion. What we have done is we have waited for our patients to have a problem rather than be proactive and preventative in their health. And we could spend another hour talking about that as a healthcare system in general, but I will say that, we may be looking at a disease that is, either preventable, or at least we can slow the progression if we take meaningful steps earlier in life. And currently, our healthcare system is not set up for us to do that. And as Greg said, when you hit the age of 30, when your bone mass peaks, that bone slowly becomes more porous over time. And really, most of the stuff that impact where you are at 30 is really depending on how much bone you've built up till the age of 30. That's usually by also physical activity and nutrition. And then, your genetics and the bone bank. So basically, by 30, you've created a savings account. Now imagine you have no insight into your savings account until someone allows you back into the bank at age 50 and says, "Oh, we're going to check how much bone savings you have," or "You broke something. Let's make sure the bank wasn't robbed." That's not really how we need to be focusing on bone health. And one thing I can impart, hopefully people take away, is everyone needs to get more proactive in taking their bone health into their own hands. And there's actionable and measurable ways to do that. And so it's really important to focus on the fact that this is something that we can get ahead of.
I completely agree with what both of you are saying. And I wanted to share one statistic, which I really found fascinating, that I hadn't heard actually until recently, which we know that we reach peak bone mass by age 30. But according to the NIH, we actually achieve 90% of our bone mass by the time by the time we're 18, and men by age 20. So imagine if we've already gotten our strongest foundation of our body at that young, if we took prevention and longevity into our hands starting at a younger age, what could be possible?
Yeah, that is such a good point. And I love that analogy. And even Sarah, now what you're sharing feeds into that analogy of our bone is like a savings account. And, you know, not paying attention, we wouldn't not pay attention to that for years and years and years on end. We'd probably be checking it every now and again, or putting some more into it as we go. So I want to start to get into some misconceptions that people might come in the door with, where maybe it is they've found out about Osteostrong, or they've been diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, or even the general public. What are either people who come in the door or just those common misconceptions? I know as a health coach, I have a number of these where, you know, people think if I eat fat, I'll be fat. Whereas healthy fats actually help us burn fat on the body, and they're essential and they're healthy for us. But things like that, you know, in my short experience specific with bone health, I've already, you know, heard some misconceptions of how we build bone, you know, how bone gets stronger, you know, how it gets weaker. What's the best way to build bone? Can I just jog or do yoga? So we'll start with you, Sarah, but what are some of those most common misconceptions you hear? And then what's kind of the truth behind that?
Yes. So I think that there are two big misconceptions that we hear regularly. And the first would be, I drink milk and I exercise, I'm good, right? And while absolutely everyone should exercise regularly, and calcium is a really important building block for our bones, those are not the only things. And unfortunately, there are a lot of other things that play a role in it. And specifically with calcium, what we've now learned, I mean, when I was growing up, it was all about calcium, 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 and drink milk all the time. And what we now know is that a really important part is how we absorb calcium in our bodies. And so we know that we can't have calcium without D and K and magnesium. And that also, it's much better to try to get calcium from the foods we eat. Milk is one way, but dairy is not the only way to get calcium. There are a lot of other sources of calcium. So that's like one of the really big myths. And then along with the exercise, we think that, I mean, I'm a great example of this. I've exercised my entire life. You were talking, Tessie, about being a CrossFit coach, and all of that is amazing and really supports us in so many ways in our bodies. But the reality is that the only way that we know to increase bone density is to have a very, very high amount of impact. Specifically in our hip joint, we need over 4 times our body weight in force in order to impact that. And that is something that is almost impossible to do with regular exercise unless we're a gymnast or a bodybuilder or someone who can really absorb huge amounts of force in their body. So until now, there really wasn't a way. And the second really big misconception that we hear is that only women and old people get osteoporosis. And in fact, that's also a big misconception. I'm really into science and data, and there's a recent study in the Journal of American Osteopathic Association, which showed that and I don't actually have the numbers of how many people, we can share it later, but in the research that they did, in the age range of 35 to 50, 25% of the men and women that participated already had osteopenia. 25% already at that age. So that's a really huge number. And what we're seeing is that those numbers are going up. And I believe that has to do with stress in our lives. It has to do with lack of sleep. It has to do with toxicity. It has to do with lack of nutrients. We no longer are eating nutrient dense foods. So there's a lot of reasons for that. But that's another one of those misconceptions. And as well, the number of men presenting with osteopenia and low bone density is also going up. So those are, I think, the two big ones that I hear. And I'm sure that Greg and Rick hear some others.
Actually, I want to add to that. I think you brought up a very good point in the fact that, people often say, and I believe this, is movement is medicine and movement as a medicine. And what has happened is we've become very generic on how we talk about bone health, meaning we tell people, okay, go do some, weight bearing exercises, go lift some weights and do some resistive strengthening, make sure you walk, take calcium and vitamin D. Okay. And what happens is we don't understand that this is a factory, and that in order to build bone, all the pieces need to be there. And then you actually need to do something for the factory to take all the raw materials and build bone. And what we've told people to do around exercise, yes, it's impactful. Walking has impact, running has impact. You mentioned these things, but as the studies have shown, nothing creates the impact that actually allows this little cell in your bone called the osteoblast to carry the minerals that you could be taking, calcium and phosphorus and all the things that you think, I'm taking this for bone. Well, they're kind of just passing through if no mechanical force occurs on the bone for that little cell to absorb it and utilize it. So there's a series of steps that need to occur. And what we've been missing as a population is what we call at Osteostrong impact emulation, which is emulating impact, putting a compressive force on the bone. So the body and the brain, which is your control command center and protective mechanism, we need to use this stuff here. This mechanical force is driven into the cells because we need to build more bone, because what if they do this again? We need to be there for Sarah when she does this again. And so I see people often exercising tremendously, okay? And you go back to this simple thing. If you took, let's just say, and no offense to any particular car, but if you took your Honda Accord off-roading, okay, and you continually jumped it, pounded it over left, right, and center, how strong is the chassis of a Honda Accord? Okay, what we're doing right now is we're putting our bodies through tremendous repetitive stress and overdrive with the intensity of workouts that we're going through. But we aren't taking a simple, what could be 10 minutes to focus on your skeletal frame to strengthen your chassis so that, and this is what's I think most important to all of us, later in life, we can potentially continue to do some of these things that we enjoy by taking some time out to focus on our skeletal frame. So I think, the way that we've been prescribing exercise and telling people to work out is actually one of the problems that we have, is you think you're building bone that way. But I would say 98% of the activities that you do aren't meaningful to stimulating bone growth.
Yes, that was formulated so succinctly. And I love that you pulled that into what Sarah shared with the, I'm, drinking my milk and I'm doing my exercise, and then getting into the specifics of like, this is very much, I can even relate to, growing up and just kind of generally in your atmosphere hearing like, oh yeah, impact helps with your bone health, but there's no specificity around exactly how much impact. And then we get to a certain age where that amount of impact, I was a college cheerleader and I started gymnastics at age 4. So I'm getting my bone scan soon to see where I'm at after age 30. But it's so interesting. I had no idea of that growing up, and there is no way you can do that at a certain age without injury. So I love that you're pulling in that physical activity piece in such a way that it should be headline news, really, and we're getting it there. So thank you for sharing that. Greg, did you have more with the misconceptions to add?
I think Sarah and Dr. Rick answered it perfectly. The only thing that I would elaborate on further, which has already been touched on, is there is this threshold that you have to stress bone in order to get the body to respond. And so if you think about any adaptation in the body, really our bodies try to operate as efficiently as possible, and they're not going to adapt unless we force them to. So a lot of people think like, okay, I understand I have to exceed 4 times my body weight to strengthen my hip and my femur, but doing 3 times my body weight must still be like pretty good, and do something for me. And a good analogy to consider in this case is it's kind of like boiling water, right? Like you can heat water to 200 degrees and it's really, really hot, but it's never going to boil at that temperature. You're never going to cross that tipping point and that threshold to get that reaction that Dr. Rick was talking about. And with bone health, it's kind of unfortunate in the sense that like the majority of exercises that most of us do don't actually trigger this reaction. So like, a good example is like a marathon runner, is doing thousands of impacts through their training and their running, and they might be experiencing 2 to 3 times their body weight. But at no point is that, effectively triggering that osteogenesis to strengthen bone. So that is definitely what the science shows us, and is a big misconception out there that just even doing some type of weight bearing exercise is going to have some benefit versus even if I can't do the amount required.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. So as we're starting to throw out more words like osteogenic loading and osteogenesis, let's dive into now kind of the specifics of what we are doing at Osteostrong for those of us on here who maybe don't know, and we're throwing out numbers like 4 times our body weight. So when someone is coming in and wanting to facilitate that bone growth and stimulate that possible bone growth in a natural way that our body knows how to do, what does that look like within a session? What are the machines that we do, and why those machines? So Greg, we can start with you on this one. Yeah.
And I guess that's a thanks, Tessie. I think, just to give a little bit of context of Osteostrong, I always like to define the problem that Osteostrong is aiming to solve. And essentially the main problem is that through all the research done in the science community, it's very clear that you need to exceed a certain amount of impact force to effectively increase your bone density. Now, the problem is that traditional exercise, and we're talking about a lot of different things when we say traditional exercise, we're talking about weightlifting, including heavy weightlifting, we're talking about running, we're talking about yoga, we're talking about Pilates, pretty much anything you would classify as a workout, you are probably not exceeding the minimum amount of force to actually trigger your body to increase your bone density over time. The things that do trigger that amount are sports like gymnastics, and if you're like an elite competitive power lifter, you can get there as well. But gymnastics and elite powerlifting are not really practical solutions for most people, especially once you're beyond age 30. So Dr. John Jaquish, who created the technology behind Osteostrong, which is a series of 4 machines, was designed to bridge that gap. So, basically the traditional exercise is readily available and mostly safe, but not very effective at strengthening bone. And the high impact exercise is effective at strengthening bone, but not very practical or safe. So Osteostrong is meant to bring together the best of both worlds so that it's practical, it's widely available. People of almost any physical condition can do it, and you can safely exceed these levels of force to actually promote your bone health. So I'll turn it over to Sarah and kind of let her explain the 4 machines that we have and kind of what a session entails.
Sure. So the 4 machines that were designed by Dr. Jaquish each target a different part of our body. And one targets, it's called the upper growth trigger, and it targets our upper bodies from shoulders down to our wrists. And what we're doing is essentially it's end-to-end compression of our bones. So we're working wrist to elbow and then elbow up to our shoulder. And the second in the series is called the lower growth trigger, and that is working from our hips down to our ankles. The third in the series is the core growth trigger, and that focuses on primarily our rib cage, but rib cage down to pelvis. You know, the rib cage is a very frequently fractured part of our body. And then the fourth one is called the postural growth trigger, and that focuses on our spine. And I think Rick can probably give some really great information on the science behind it and how it all works.
I think we've covered a lot, like in theory, talking about what's occurring, right? And we can try and bring this together a little bit, is that, you know, what is occurring is the machine is placing you in an optimal biomechanical range for your body. And I think as Sarah described, you know, when you fall, let's start with the uppers, you fall on outstretched arms, okay, typically. So the machines are again designed for more natural things that occur in your body and positioning that you go under. So the upper growth trigger is designed the same way. Now what's occurring right in this machine is that 2 forces at the exact same time are matching one another, okay? So when that occurs, okay, you've got this, like, you know, very solid machine, and you've got your bone. And when you push against it, nothing moves. There's very, very small amounts of joint motion, which you might notice, you know, in your lower legs and shoulder, but it's very similar to what physical therapists will relate as an isometric motion, meaning there's not a lot of motion, which makes this machine extremely safe. Because often what we do is when we put ourselves through dynamic range, which means movement, okay, and then put a heavy load on ourselves, okay, or do it in repetitive fashion, we get wear and tear, or we are susceptible to injury. So the way that the robot technology counteracts your force, something compresses. And when you get to that multiple of body weight that Greg is talking about, and the machines are tracking that, okay, you're having some compression is better than none, obviously, but as you get stronger and stronger from 1 session a week onward, you will reach even these triggers where that compression then becomes meaningful to stimulate bone growth. And that is done again by the brain going under this command center saying, we got to do more here. We got to protect the body. And it creates this response to stimulate. And then, as Sarah's already mentioned, you got to have the building blocks on board. You got to have the nutrients on board, right? So that's where these supplementations and these things come into play, where are you in optimal health? So you have everything on board to actually utilize when you undergo, you know, your trigger. And so that's how these machines work. So it's impact emulation, right? It's basically this machine allows you to emulate impact in a safe way and puts you in a biomechanical position, okay, that optimally loads the different areas that Sarah described. And so session after session, think about this. It's like an adaptive trigger is getting reoccurring in your body over and over again the exact same way, and your body is adapting to it week in, week out. And then all of a sudden, you know, you have these great gains. You know, today was, you know, these days you come in, and today was a day a member came in and you know, 2 years. And this is the challenge. We don't exactly know time. Okay, and on our big wall in Osteostrong, it says trust the process, because sometimes we could see results in 6 months into a year. Sometimes it could take 2 years, but in 2 years, you know, she had gained 10% in bone mass in her spine and hip, and she was no longer osteoporotic. So these gains, and her goal was to tell her physicians that she didn't want to take medications. And yes, I understand that medications are the gold standard still in healthcare. However, again, we have to embrace disruptive technology as we do with our phones every day, in the fact that we are now learning, again, I will say this, you remember, is that the innate ability of the body to heal itself. And Dr. Jaquish has created incredible technology that is allowing you to harness that potential. And it seems hard. And that's, I think, Tessa, you started this with, you know, it's, you come in and you're just not sure how this all works. And it's very hard to explain, but think about, we are creating a stimulus for your body to create bone. We don't have a stimulus like this right now in the market.
Can I add one other thing to that, which is, this is specifically for the women in the audience, which I imagine that there are a lot of here, which is that I think sometimes we underestimate our strength. And what we know from Dr. Jaquish's research is we're actually 7 times stronger when we're put into our strongest position than we are in our weakest position. So imagine in CrossFit, if you were able to completely remove your weakest range of motion, how strong you'd be. So what we're able to do at Osteostrong is we remove that position completely. So you're never in your weaker range, and we only put you in a very safe position where you're at your absolute strongest. And so you're 7 times stronger than you'd be if you were trying to do any of this stuff at the gym. And that is why it's so powerful for us and so safe.
Awesome. Yes, I love that addition. And I know that's always something, you know, even hearing, you know, women and our female members who come in, you know, it's something I've seen. Even, you know, I've been working with Osteostrong now about 3-ish months. And even in that time period, having seen women who come through and they're, you know, 6 months in or 10 sessions in, right? It's 1 session a week. So that's just even a few months in. And, you know, just hearing them verbally share, like, I feel stronger. Wow, my upper body is getting stronger. And this is a piece we're going to get into with, there's a question about this in the Q&A of what outside of Osteostrong can also pertain to my bone health. And we've touched on it a little bit, right? Other physical activity, nutrition, hormones, that sort of thing. But I absolutely love everything you guys have shared. We'll start with this question in the Q&A because it's kind of connected to what we're talking about now. What does a session look like when someone starts at Osteostrong? They come in, okay, we work through these 4 machines, which can stimulate my bone building activity through the brain and the body. And that process, when we're stimulating those osteoblasts in those cells, and that process, why we come in once a week, this hasn't been specifically mentioned yet, is that just like muscles, when we work out and then, you know, we have a recovery time. So it's not necessarily recovery time, but the process of our bones continuing that bone building process is like 7 to 10 days. So that's the reason why we only need to come in that once a week. And you guys can expand on that if I'm not explaining it perfectly. But someone in here asked for a little more details on what's happening when we start our session on a vibration plate. So if whoever wants to take that question, they're asking, what does it really do? What's kind of going on in the body on the vibe plate?
Rick, do you want to answer that one?
Well, you great. You and Sarah can go ahead. I just had a long discussion, so go ahead, take it, Greg.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, the vibe plate, there's a number of benefits to using a vibration platform. We use it for a couple different purposes in our center, but that's definitely not all of the benefits. So I'll let Sarah and Rick kind of elaborate on some of the other ones, but the primary ones for an Osteostrong session is you've just come off, you know, you've just driven to the center, you're getting out of your car, you're coming into the center, and you're about to load your body with way more force than your body experiences any other time in the week. We don't want you just going from parking lot to loading really, really heavy. So the vibration of the vibration plate itself, first and foremost, helps activate your muscles. So that starts to get those muscles firing, starts to activate your central nervous system, and just get things in sync before we actually load. So we don't often use the term warm up, but if that's an easy way for you to comprehend it, you can think of it as effectively a warm up prior to your session. And then post session, there are some neurological things that I'll let Dr. Rick touch on if he wants to. But the other thing is it's a great opportunity to work on your balance. So you've just done your session. You've put more load on every muscle and part of your musculoskeletal system in your whole body, put a tremendous load on that. Everything is firing, and now you can go work on some motor skills, work on some balance on a vibration platform afterwards. So those are the two primary benefits. There's certainly others, but again, getting ready for your session and then working on some balance afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think, Greg, you covered it very well for the purpose of Osteostrong. Vibration, technology has a lot of different health benefits that they talk about. If you look up to get your own vibe plate, all things that I've seen members do also is, vibration is, a percussion at a certain frequency. So what we've also seen people do is address areas of soreness and stiffness to alleviate pain. We have members lie on their backs, we have them lie directly on their shoulders or their hips, because basically, that vibration allows things to start loosening and tissues to start moving and the fascial planes to loosen up. And so it's another way actually also to relieve pain. So I agree. In an Osteostrong session, we look at it as the wake up, right? It really comes in, gets things moving, prepares you to undergo this load. It sort of reactivates your CNS system. Okay, gets that already. So that when you go under this session, everything's engaged and ready to go. Right. And then you come back off it and you're able to we recommend members sometimes to even do some core activities on it, do some stretches and do some other things, address areas of pain and tightness, because that's the other piece that vibration can impact. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And the person who specifically asked this was also potentially thinking about, I think, getting one at home. So who would you recommend getting a vibe plate also to do at home? And is there one that you recommend?
Well, we use from a company called vibeplate.com. That's what we use at all of our Osteostrong locations. But the really important thing, if you're going to get one for home use, is that you want it to be vibrating at 30 hertz. And that is essentially, the frequency level that's been studied the most by NASA and other research that's out there. And that essentially means that it's vibrating at 30 vibrations a second. And that's kind of the sweet spot of where we've seen the most impact, whether it be, there is some research out there that NASA has done on bone density and vibration plates. There's I think some competing research out there, some saying that it supports it more than others. But the most important thing is that you're getting one that hits that 30 hertz marker.
Awesome. Great advice. Love it. Thank you guys for sharing that one. And we'll kind of continue on with the Q&A here. And then I also want to give opportunity, as question I've shared, for you guys to dive in a little more to the we touched on it a little bit, kind of the expectations of where can our results lie. Everything from there's someone could do it 6 months and see a certain benefit. Some people, they can feel stronger, they can feel balanced, they can get a bone scan a year later and have stopped or slowed their bone loss. So let's touch on that really quick. Some results we can expect, or I know it's not about promising anything because every body is so different, but just share a little bit about what you guys have seen, and even, you know, Dr. Ricken, I think, from that perspective of even things you've maybe seen. I know we have members like pre-op and post-op where their healing was a little bit faster because they have been doing their Osteostrong sessions, or, you know, and this isn't a way that we want to find out, but we've had older members who have fallen here in Colorado. It can be icy and they're like, I didn't break anything. And I actually felt like I bounced back. So that to me is are huge successes in general, whether we know exactly what our bone density is or not. So I'd love to hear some of what you guys have seen in members, just any results all across the board.
Yeah, I can start. And this is, I say this with a smile because if I own an Osteostrong center, so it's always, I want to be very clear, but I do really believe that it's one of the greatest lifestyle choices you can make. And the reason I say that is because of the ability for the centers to focus on two main things. One is the ability to support and regenerate your skeletal frame. To me, anti-aging or pro-aging, if you want to call it, starts with skeletal wellness. It is so important and often underlooked. And what I have noticed from members beyond a lot who are waiting for that bone result to shift, right? What we have to understand is that there are a lot of factors that play in bone health. So it can be environmental, it can be genetic, it can be your nutrition, it can be your hormones, it can be, autoimmune or inflammation issues in your body. Osteostrong is the physical activity component of this where you check the box. Okay, so if you focus on physical function first and say, I'm going to see if physically I can get this moving, okay, or I want to be preventative, this is the place you start. And then yes, if you don't respond, okay, in some time, or you're seeing a decline, that also can mean, hey, have we checked everything else that goes on in their functional bone health? And this has become a little bit more of a passion of mine this past year, working on a program for myself to actually be able to help solve for that, because you don't have the knowledge to empower yourself to take your bone health into your own hands. And I'm here to tell you that with the right knowledge and guidance, you can start to unravel, what's going on with you, because nobody knows your body better than yourself. And what I've learned about people coming into Osteostrong is the vitality that it gives them in their lives. It's not just about bone density. I see people talking about how they sleep better, okay? Their mood is better, okay? They recover faster, okay? They feel just better in their physical frame, and sometimes their bone density didn't change. So they keep coming because of what you said, things like, well, I fall, right? I go upstairs without discomfort. My back doesn't hurt anymore. I'm back playing soccer on the beach with my kids. There's so many areas of improvement in your body when you focus on the skeletal frame. So I tell people this is a lifestyle choice. And what's very simple, and we call it, the ultimate biohack, because in 10 minutes, you've addressed your skeletal frame and you're out the door. But not to be mentioned all the modalities of recovery that we have, that if you spend the time, you come out feeling recharged and energized and reset. And that is so important in our fast-paced world. I think, COVID allowed some of us to over reset, me included, so, but the thing is that, it does allow us to do that. And so look at it as a lifestyle choice alongside of your decision to impact your skeletal health and bone density.
Yeah, that's such great advice, Dr. Rick. As the person on the panel who's owned a location for the longest, I feel like I would love to just share some of the experiences that we've seen in our members, because ultimately what we all want to know is like, what are the results that we're seeing? And of course, as Dr. Rick shared, results are always going to vary, and everybody's body, no two bodies are alike. And there's so many factors that are at play aside from Osteostrong in terms of nutrient absorption and sleep and stress levels, et cetera. But what we've seen since we've opened in April, it'll be our 3-year anniversary, and we've had over 50 members who've had significant increases in bone density. So we've seen people going from osteoporosis to osteopenia. We just had our first man go from osteoporosis to osteopenia. He's in his 60s and just had some great results. We've had 2 people go back to normal bone density, which is amazing. And to answer someone's question that I saw in the chat, you know, even those people who've gone back to normal bone density, well, the way that I like to think about it is, if I have a goal of working out to get my body to feel and look a certain way, once I hit that level, I'm not going to stop then, right? Because if I stop, things start going back the other direction. So I think that the goal would be that we continue to maintain these lifestyle changes down the road. But we also have seen people coming in with, you know, huge shifts in pain in their bodies. Also great results in younger people with some athletic performance, or people who were athletes who've had major injuries, who are able to perform again in ways that they never had. I mean, I've told this story before, but we have a gentleman who was a competitive soccer player, and he'd had multiple ACL surgeries in his knee. And when he came to us, he couldn't run at all anymore. And now he's back on the soccer field. So imagine what that would be like if you were unable to run, or if you had pain in your body on a regular basis, and then it was gone. I mean, it's such a profound shift for people.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives me chills just to think about that, you know, that change in just the life quality and life experience that we might have. We're getting towards the end of the hour, so I want to make sure we answer all the questions. Greg, did you want to add on to this one though first?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add quickly, just when we start talking about results, is, and Dr. Rick and Sarah both kind of touched on this, is there's kind of 2 camps. There's results that we quantify. So when you think about like a DEXA scan, right? And then there's results that we are more quality based, and that's more of like how you feel, whether you break something when you actually fall down, like, you know, in all of those things. We see results in both camps frequently. And, you know, if there's one thing that I could change about the bone health industry, it's that there's such an extreme focus on the DEXA scan score. And, you know, Dr. Rick kind of mentioned this earlier, kind of the normal protocol when people, if their main goal is bone density, they usually go to the doctor, they get prescribed a pharmaceutical and told to take vitamin D and calcium, and then they'll remeasure their bone density scan. But, you know, when you're thinking about why someone cares about their bone density in the first place, it's because they don't want to break something. They want to be healthy. They want their body to feel good. They want to be strong. And density of something doesn't tell you all of that information. So, you know, I think tests will evolve over time as new technology comes along. But right now, the DEXA scan is the industry standard in the medical space. But sometimes it gets too much focus, and there's a lot of other things you can accomplish and do really well for your body in doing something like Osteostrong.
Yeah, and I want to add, you know, one thing that's really important here is that the DEXA scan, you know, we run into this all the time. Chasing down your DEXA results between year to year, location to location, who tested you, there's a lot of variability. So yes, do we in medicine call it the gold standard? We do, because we don't have anything better. But it is by far not the most accurate way to measure, you know, not the most accurate way to consistently monitor your progress. And yes, you know, one thing that DEXA scan is that it only allows you to measure the quantity of bone, not the quality of your bone. Now, there is some software that's starting to develop called a trabecular bone score, which will actually add quality. There are ultrasound-based technologies now emerging. I happen to be one of the few doctors in the country currently testing it on members and general patients, because it will actually allow us to safely monitor your bone density by doing a non-radiating test over and over again. But I think what Greg said is so important, because osteoporosis is called the silent killer. And the reason it's called the silent killer is because it's not osteoporosis that necessarily kills you. It's the morbidity that occurs, or mortality that occurs, by the fact that you fall and fracture or something like that happens. So why I take that a step back is that if you are focused on something like Osteostrong, where you're supporting your skeletal frame, talking about bones, ligaments, muscles, neuromuscular function and coordination and balance, and you reduce your fall risk, you can actually ambulate and move through life. Yes, you may have weaker bones than the person next to you, but if you have a much lower risk of falling, okay, or your upper arms are extremely strong, so you can brace your falls, maybe your lower legs are not because your hips tend to be weaker. There's so many different ways that you can impact that, reducing that risk. So I want to say that I agree with you. We're putting too much on just a number sometimes, rather than every other benefit that can potentially go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that we're speaking into that as well, because while we are talking about skeletal health and bone health, and then we're keep bringing it back to, what's the DEXA scan? But that's a really important factor, that there's more to it, that can be in our own experience in our own body, or just different results outside of that we see. And there's other aspects to our Osteostrong session that are helping with the other parts of bone health, our bone flexibility and that sort of thing, that it sounds like hopefully soon we will have machines that can read that as well, or calculate more to bone health. So the next question is, and we've touched on this a little bit, but just if there's a general explanation around describing the correlation between our hormone deficiency and bone loss in aging. So what is the importance of hormone balance when it comes to bone health? If there's just like some general info on that.
This is a really complicated question to answer. So what I will say is, I'll go back a little bit just to try and address it, is it can be related, but it's not always related. So the way I approach bone health, these days is, one, let's just look at the core components, right? Are you physically active? Are you focused on nutrient dense foods, whole food nutrition? Is your gut health optimized so that you can actually absorb these nutrients into your body? And then you have something that's creating an impact that can actually use it. Then you need to recheck, right? Which is why we need better ways to assess which way your bone health is going. What a lot of people don't know is there's testing that can assess whether you're in positive or negative bone balance. Are you just excreting bone, or has your body actually slowed that process down? When we can't see shifts in some of the markers that we call like bone markers, then we say, okay, if there's not an initial sign of a hormone deficiency, we need to look at hormones, right? If someone comes in with autoimmune issue, and we say, well, we need to address that alongside bone, because we know there's something there that could also be impacting it. So it is very relevant. It's just not something I would do for everybody unless something wasn't responding, or depending on what stage you're at, right? That decision is, there's a little bit of clinical decision making on how deep you go. But I will say, looking at yourself more holistically, okay, looking at yourself more holistically is very important, as you not just take on your bone health, but you look at your overall health. It's very important. And we're going to see a lot of interesting things around precision medicine, which means everybody is different. And we need to start optimizing people's health towards you, which is why I'm such an advocate of testing people at a young age. I don't want to know your bone density compared to the standards. I want to just know what Tessie's bone density was at 30 and how she's progressing, compared to that. And so I see it even a thing that, sort of like spreading the word, and endocrinologists don't know this. A lot of physicians don't necessarily know this because we haven't looked at the whole thing. And that's what I'm telling people to do, is gain the knowledge to learn how to approach your bone health, because there's a lot of pieces and fragments. And Osteostrong is one center that starts to look at the physical portion of your life. And then when you don't respond, you can actually look and say, is it something else? Because it's not just non-response to Osteostrong. There could be other factors at play.
Got it. Yes. A great succinct way of saying that, you know, sometimes that does come into play where yes, we test our hormones, we might test our nutrient assimilation, and we have different resources that we, you know, can guide people towards. Whereas, you know, that piece of the osteogenic loading is what's happening at Osteostrong. Last quick question. Someone asked about Perilinks D test. I'm thinking maybe this is potentially a new PYRILINKS, a new bone scanner type of test. I don't know if you've heard of that or know anything about it, Dr. Rick.
No, I mean, I know there are some tests around bone markers, and sometimes people word them differently. So that one doesn't strike me. But there are, you know, you can ask for some bone markers to be tested, but I'm not aware of that one, or maybe it's just spelled wrong.
Yeah, great. Okay, I want to make sure we wrap up. Thank you guys so much for offering, like, even with an hour, like you have each mentioned at some point, we could have probably taken one thing out of today and spent a full hour on it. So I love the, you know, the value that was delivered. I think we got a lot of explanation that can be so puzzling, even when we already are a member of like, what exactly is happening in my body? And you guys just so beautifully explained that and kind of went over it. So I know this was super valuable. And I'd love for each of you just to quickly share, you know, where can people find you, learn more about your location, and you can share where you guys are located.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Tessie. And thank you everyone who joined us today. You know, I'm the owner here in Denver. So, you know, you'll often see me and my wife down at Osteostrong Lakewood or Osteostrong DTC. We're a little incapacitated with having a little one at home right now. So we have been taking some time off, but you know, you can always reach out to us through our centers, or, you know, my email is gregpreston@osteostrong.me. Would love to hear from you guys, just some feedback on this, even before you sign off today, just, you know, what you'd like to learn more about, maybe in some future webinars that we do. But again, thank you guys so much for your time. We don't take it lightly, and hope you got a lot of value out of this hour with us.
I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you for the other panelists for your valuable insights and information. I love when I learn things on these Zoom calls, which I frequently do, especially in the presence of people like you all. So I, again, own Osteostrong in Los Angeles. There are multiple locations in Los Angeles, but if you're on the west side of LA, I'm in Mar Vista, which is on the Venice, Marina del Rey border. There are also locations in the Valley and Studio City, Encino, Tarzana. And there are actually 145 locations around the world now. So it's very likely that if someone you think needs us, that there might be a location where they are. So I encourage you all to share with your friends as well if you think it might serve them in supporting their health goals also. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, well, great. Thanks for having me. It's always good to see fellow, you know, owners and see so many people in a room interested about bone health. It reminds me that there are a lot of questions unanswered. You know, I can be reached on Instagram at Dr. Rick. I will soon have an option to be reached through virtual healthcare to focus on lifestyle and bone health. So that's an exciting thing to keep in mind to help people put the puzzle pieces together. But look, I will say that, you know, a lot of this is within your grasp, and you can make a lot of things happen for yourself. And Osteostrong, really, I believe this very strongly. If you, any of these locations, you got to trust the process. You go in there and it is different. You may not feel anything right away, and you'll question, what am I doing and why am I doing that? And it may take a while. But what I will impart to you when you decide to join is, remember to look for the subtle changes in your life first, because those are the things that people don't appreciate. Things like, oh, actually my husband was telling me I do stand up straighter. Okay, I've actually noticed I walk a little bit longer. I don't wake up or get out of bed with pain anymore. There's these subtle changes in your body, and when you start to appreciate those, you will gain momentum. And that's the most important advice I can give to anybody starting at Osteostrong, is trust the process and start to look for the subtle changes, because that will motivate you into the big ones. So with that, thanks so much, Greg and Tessie, for putting this together and having me here. It's always a pleasure to spread knowledge. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Any last comments of what you'd like to see more of or questions? Feel free to pop those in the chat. I'll stay on for just a few more minutes. If you guys need to hop off, you can. And we will close it out. Any last words from the panelists?
Tessie, if someone asked if this was being recorded and if they'd be able to watch it again.
Yes, we are recording the session, and it'll be emailed out to everyone who registered, and we'll probably be posting it like on our Facebook as well for people to learn more.
Awesome. Well, thank you for organizing this, Tessie. Thank you, Dr. Rick and Sarah, for joining today. I certainly learned a lot myself.
Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. All right, we'll close it out. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and have a great rest of your evening. Bye.